Hello, hello. I am so excited for today's podcast episode because I think that it's going to give you some really actionable, tangible benchmarks to sort of measure your Instagram success against. Because oftentimes I find that therapists and content creators in general are really getting focused on the number of views their reels get and the number of likes their content gets. But those are actually probably the least important things in terms of what's going to drive success for your business. And so if you want to think about Instagram a little bit more strategically and see, what's actually working, what should I be doing more of, where do I need to improve? This episode is going to be a ton of help for you. So, analytics can be kind of confusing, especially if you're not a numbers person or you're new to marketing. And I get that it can feel sort of intimidating to look at your numbers, but they are super, super important because they're going to give you more information about what's working so you can get more clients from Instagram. And when you understand analytics, it makes it a lot easier to actually stop spiraling and to just post a little bit more strategically. So, all of these analytics can be found in either your professional dashboard on Instagram, and you do need to have a creator or business account in order to get access to analytics. So you can either find that in your professional dashboard or on each individual reel, post, story. Can usually view insights as well and see that on a post by post basis. I'm not going to do a full rundown of where exactly to find analytics because I find that the Instagram app varies quite a bit depending on your profile. So I have my Sit with Kelly account and my Business of Therapy account, and the instructions even for how I would find the analytics on both of these accounts are different, even though I'm doing them on the same phone, which is just wild of Instagram. But either way, totally fine. Just play around with it, and I promise it shouldn't be too hard for you to find these numbers. So let's talk about first, we're going to talk through what metrics I want you to pay attention to. And then I'm actually going to give you some benchmarks in terms of numbers that you should try and aim for when you're looking at your analytics and when you're creating content to sort of assess what's working. And then we'll talk about how to actually utilize this information to adapt your Instagram strategy. So, the first metric that I think is important to pay attention to is reach, right? And this is how many unique people saw your post, your reel, your story, right? How many individual humans actually came across this content. And your views might be higher than this, your impressions might be higher, because sometimes people will view a piece of content of yours two times, three times, right? Which is amazing. But we want to know how many eyeballs were actually on your content. And for me, this is always really empowering because even when I feel like something flops, when I actually slow down and I think about it and I'm like, okay, this reached 400 people or this reached 2,000 people. Like that's a lot of people, no matter which way you look at it. And so I think that that is really helpful. Then we're going to look about engagements, right? So engagements are really like any interaction that people do with your post or your reel. So this could be likes, it could be comments, it could be saves, it could be shares. Recently Instagram launched a new repost feature. All of this is engagement. And then we can calculate an engagement rate based off of the number of engagements that you have divided by the total reach of that post or reel, right? And this is a better measure of connection than likes alone. Because if your reel got seen by 10,000 people and got 10 likes, that's not super good engagement, right? Like that means something wonky was happening with the algorithm where it continued to show it to people, but people weren't really very interested in your content. They weren't interacting with it a ton. Now, if your same reel got 10 likes, but it only reached 300 people, that's a pretty good engagement rate, right? So that means that like the majority of people who were seeing it were interested. And so that I think is just more helpful to think about of what is the engagement rate, the total number of engagements divided by reach, versus just focusing on like the number of likes or something. Next, we're going to look at profile visits. And this is often a really good indicator of how interested somebody is in working with you. So, profile visit means that somebody came across your reel or your post, and then they decided to actually click into your profile, right? So, this might mean that they were interested in deciding if they should follow you. They wanted to see more of your posts and see what you're about. They wanted to use that call to action and go to your link in bio, right? They were interested in learning more in some way. And so this is a really good indicator that your content is resonating. It is having like long-term impacts on your business. People aren't just liking and scrolling away. So profile visits are a really, really, really powerful metric. Next up, I think the most important one is website clicks, right? So this is where clients start to move towards your therapy website or your intro call scheduler, right? They're actually clicking that link in your bio. And website clicks can be found on your professional dashboard, and that indicates people who are clicking that link in bio. Um, there's also link clicks from stories, which I'll talk about in a bit. And that is people actually clicking the link that you're sharing in stories. And so those are two different metrics. So website clicks are really coming from your in feed content, from your posts and from your reels, and people just sort of like exploring your page. Whereas link clicks, which can be found on like a story by story basis, are from you sharing that link directly in your stories. Okay, the last metric we're going to talk through is follows. So, follower growth matters, right? But it does not matter nearly as much as website clicks or link clicks if your goal is to get clients from Instagram. You do not need to have tens and thousands of followers in order to have a full caseload, right? I've worked with hundreds of therapists who have filled their caseload with less than 1,000 followers. It is really about having the right people in your community who are local to you, who are dealing with what you're helping, and ready to like take action and move into therapy with you. And so I do think follows is like a helpful metric because most of us want to grow on Instagram. And so it's good to see that your audience is growing over time. And you do need to have some audience growth, right? Like it's going to be pretty hard to get therapy clients with 50 followers, but you do not need nearly as many as you might think. Okay, so let's talk about benchmarks for each of these. What numbers should you be hoping to see when you are analyzing these numbers in your account, when you're looking at these analytics? So let's talk through first engagement rate. Smaller accounts tend to have higher engagement rates, right? So if you have less than 10,000 followers, you're probably going to have a much higher engagement rate than somebody with 10,000 followers. If you have 10,000 followers, you're probably going to have a much higher engagement rate than somebody with 100,000 followers. And that's okay, right? I think that as you have like a smaller audience, there tends to be more connection and you really have like the right people following you because your audience is small. So you probably haven't had anything that went viral and that's brought in like a ton of people who weren't really interested in your other content. You know, you're probably a newer account, so people are still pretty like active on their Instagram pages they're following you from. And that's a really good thing. That's a really good strength, right? It's one of the reasons why I think that therapists, again, do not need a zillion followers to get clients from Instagram. You're actually going to have higher engagement when your audience is small and like really niche down. So when you have a smaller account, which is what I'll give the metric for, rates between 2 to 3% are pretty good for engagement rate. Anything over 3% is like exceptional. As your following grows, this rate might dip, and that's okay. When you're reaching more people, less folks will engage. It causes your engagement rate to dip. Totally, totally normal, even from like a brand deal perspective. That's to be expected. So if you are somebody who has eventual goals of doing brand partnerships, it is fine if your engagement rate starts to drop a little bit when your account grows. We just still want to focus on doing everything we can to maximize and increase engagement. Okay, profile visits are the next thing we want to look at. And those we're going to look at on like a post by post basis. And you can see that when you look at the individual pieces of content that you shared, either from your professional dashboard or from, the individual post itself. If you were getting 1% of profile visits from like, so if 1% of people who you reach with a post actually go and visit your profile, that is really great, right? Oftentimes it's going to be less. So I want to sort of like set a realistic metric or a realistic standard with meeting that metric. Um, and that's okay. But 1% is like, we are rocking it. This is a great post. We had a strong call to action, all of that. And, I want you to think about like why this might vary, right? So if you have a strong call to action to follow you at the end of the post, you're probably going to get more profile visits. If you have a strong call to action to visit your link in bio, you're probably going to get a lot of profile visits. Now, for me on my Business of Therapy account, I actually don't get a ton of profile visits. I'm like very far off from meeting this metric. But usually, because I'm not doing a call to action to follow or to visit my website, I'm using a call to action telling people to comment a keyword, and then I will DM them the link to something. And so they have no reason to go visit my profile, right? They don't need to go grab that link themselves. They need to comment, and then I will send it to them. So it's just something to sort of think about there. Inside of Private Practice Academy bundle, I teach therapists how to run like very low cost ads for $5 a day. And there we're actually aiming for like an even higher profile visit metric of like 3 to 5%. So, it really varies on the type of content, the purpose of the content, if you're putting ad dollars behind it. But I think 1% is a pretty good starting point of understanding what's working really well and what you should do more of. And again, like I wouldn't beat yourself up for the posts that are not getting 1%. Instead, I would see like which posts are doing the best, and how, like, what is it about them? What can I do more of in my other posts to get that? So looking at like, is it the last slide that you're doing in a carousel that has a call to action? Is it the caption? Was it, something that you told from like a personal point of view for a story? Was it something really educational, right? Like what sort of content is driving profile visits? Okay, now I promised you that we were going to talk about link clicks in stories. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is when you share a link in your story, right? Oftentimes, I think that therapists share most often their intro call scheduler in stories. And that is really good. I definitely recommend doing that like 3 to 4 times a week if you are actively seeking clients. Now, sharing a link to an intro call scheduler is something that has like a pretty high intent to move forward, right? So if you are sharing a link and saying, I'm accepting new therapy clients, I work with women in Montana who experience anxiety, and you share, schedule a free 20-minute intro call to get started, you're probably not going to get a ton of link clicks on that in terms of volume because we're speaking to such a small subset of your audience, right? We're only speaking to the women in Montana who don't have a therapist, who are actively seeking therapy, and who are ready to take that next step and work with you. Now, let's say that you are sharing a link to a blog post that you wrote that's about 10 ways to manage back to school anxiety as a mom. You might get a lot higher link clicks on that because all of the anxious moms in your audience can actually benefit from that. And so they're going to click it, right? There's much lower intent in terms of working with you. And so, they might just click it out of curiosity. They might click it to read the article. They might click it, be another therapist, like clicking it for inspiration, right? There's a lot more options there for who would be interested in clicking that. And so I think that that's just something helpful to think about with these numbers of, how important is this link click and how likely is this link click to actually drive results for my business? And probably the more like further down that funnel the link is, the less clicks that you're going to get. So like for instance, if I'm sharing a free training or a free challenge that I'm doing, I'll get a lot more link clicks on those stories than when I'm actually sharing a link to the offer, right? If I'm sharing a link to join the Reels membership or a link to join the Private Practice Academy bundle, and I'm linking that sales page, it's going to have much lower link clicks than when I'm linking a free resource. And that's okay. Neither is right or wrong. You should be doing both things, but just something to sort of preface this with. So, in general, if you get 1% of people who are viewing your story to click the link, that is really, really great, right? And like I said, for myself, some are way higher. Like when I share free things, oftentimes I'll get like 10% link clicks, which is amazing. And some are way lower, like 0.5%. And that's okay, right? Like we're not trying to make either right or wrong. We're just trying to look at like an average and have a good general rule of thumb here. Okay, and the last thing we're going to benchmark is followers. So I think that this one is a little bit tricky to benchmark in terms of like giving you a strict percentage or a number. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that today. In general, we want follower growth to be happening every month. I think that that is a great goal. And in general, we want those numbers to like increase over time. Now, you are always, always, always going to see in your professional dashboard follows and unfollows. And every single person gets unfollows every day, every week, every month. And that does not mean that you are doing anything wrong, right? That is totally normal and it happens for a few reasons. So sometimes people will unfollow you because they don't have their Instagram account anymore, right? If their Instagram account gets deleted, if they delete it, if they were a bot that didn't even exist to begin with and Instagram deletes it, those are all going to be unfollows. Sometimes people will unfollow you because they followed you for like a specific post or reel or moment in time in their life, and now that content no longer resonates. Some people will unfollow you because they're doing just like a cleaning spree, right? Like I often unsubscribe from emails just to kind of keep my inbox much lighter. Some people will unfollow you because they're triggered by something. All of that is totally, totally okay. In general, I think that you want to have more people following you than unfollowing you. And that is a good rule of thumb and a good benchmark to sort of um, measure yourself against, right? Now, again, there's going to be exceptions to this, right? So, like for instance, on my Sit with Kelly page, since announcing my pregnancy, I have gotten more unfollows and follows, and my engagement rate for content has never been higher. And so, for me, that's really okay. What I've learned is like I've sort of been shifting niches a little bit. I've been leaning a lot more into personal content. I've been sharing a lot more behind the scenes and pregnancy related content. And so some people are really enjoying that. It's building a much tighter knit community in a lot of ways. And other people are in that stage of life or they're triggered by it and they're deciding to unfollow. They didn't come, follow me for pregnancy related content to begin with. And so for me, I'm like happy for those people to unfollow if they don't want that content because them seeing my content and scrolling past it and not engaging is like hurting my engagement. It's hurting how much the algorithm thinks that my content is valuable. And so I'm okay with having a little bit more unfollows and follows lately. And that's just like sort of life, right? And so if you are seeing more unfollows and follows, I just want you to sort of think about like, is there a reason that explains this, right? Are you like switching niches? Are you switching gears? Or if not, right, is there something that we need to try and do differently to really increase the followers, increase the engagement? What are you saying that's sort of like pissing people off? Is that okay with you? Is it not okay? Another time I've gotten a lot of unfollows is when I start talking about politics and I'm like, I'm happy for people who disagree with my political takes to unfollow, right? But it's just sort of about like deciding what feels good for you there. And again, remembering that you do not need to have a zillion people in your audience. You need a couple hundred followers who are tight knit, who resonate with what you have to say. And that is enough to build a very, very successful business. Okay, so to wrap up, let's talk about how we're going to utilize this information. I do not want you to start obsessing over your analytics and looking at it every single day. I think that if you are looking at analytics once or twice a month, you are doing much better than most content creators, and that is enough for you to drive results in your business. In general, we are looking for patterns, right? So, what topics drive the most engagement? What topics drive the most profile visits? What post formats drive the most saves and shares, right? We want to look for themes so that way we can understand what's performing well and how can I do more of this. So, for example, if you do posts with scripts for setting boundaries and that does better than posts where you talk about people pleasing, maybe you lean more into doing boundary scripts for a lot of different scenarios, right? If you're like, oh, this format has done really well. And that's still content that is great for people pleasers, but it might resonate more with folks than saying, like, here's signs that you're a people pleaser or people pleasers listen up, right? They might struggle to actually assert themselves and set a boundary. And so we're still speaking to people pleasers by giving them that resource and support. But now we have a better idea of what's working for them, what's resonating with them, what's driving results for your business. So that's just an example of like how you might tweak and adapt based on some of what you're seeing. And I want to remind you that your goal is not to be good at Instagram, right? Unless it is like if your goal is to do content creation and like get brand partnerships, you really need to pay attention to like follows, engagement rate, all of that. But for 99% of us, your main goal here is actually to fill your caseload with therapy clients, right? And so you do not need to have a zillion likes or comments or followers. We really want to focus on moving people from follower to therapy client. And so your homework for this week is I want you to take a look at your insights for the last month and find a post or a story set that performed best in terms of getting link clicks or website taps. And I want you to study it and see What about that content do you think worked? How can you use a similar topic or framework to repeat it, to repurpose it, and to see if we can drive some of those results again? Because I would love to see you work smarter, not harder, and to really, really do the things that are going to work in moving your people forward and getting you more private pay clients on your caseload. All right, that's all for today, my friends. I will see you here same time next week.